Let's head to Washington now, where President Joe Biden has told African leaders attending a three-day summit that the United States was all in on Africa's future. He met leaders from Gabon, Liberia, and others facing polls next year for a discussion on elections and democratic principles. He also met Nigeria's President Buhari. Mr. Biden addressed what he called America's original sin, the enslavement of millions of people, and honored their descendants and the broader African diaspora community in the United States. The White House said the U.S. is bringing resources to the table during the summit, adding that America's commitment to invest in the African continent compares favorably to other countries. Mr. Biden is also expected to back the African Union's admission as a permanent member of the group of 20 major economies.
The heart of the deep and profound connection that forever binds Africa and the United States together. We remember the stolen men and women and children were brought to our shores in chains, subjected to unimaginable cruelty. My nation's original sin was that period. We honor their descendants who are generations for generations have helped build this country and propel it to higher heights, leading the charge, blazing new trails, and forging a better future for everyone in America. Raising your glass to the people of America, to the people of the United States, to the people of Africa, and to the promise and potential of our partnership. Hear, hear.
We share the same spirit. We want to advance our common agenda with you and take our partnership to the next level in an inclusive approach, bringing together governments, the private sector, civil society, and the African diaspora.
Well, for more of this, let's speak to Arise correspondent Adesuwa Omoruan, who joins us now from Washington, D.C. It looks a bit cold where you are, Adesuwa. Thank you very much indeed for braving the elements and joining us. Mr. Biden there, in a sense, going back to the future, because the first summit was in 2014, and he's attempting to get it going again, saying the U.S. is all in on Africa's future. Tell us more.
Thank you so much, Charles. I don't know if it's the rings or the late dinner the leaders had yesterday night or the semi-finals match between Morocco and France, which President Muhammadu Buhari, alongside President Biden and some African leaders watched together, or the number of deals that were signed. But things got to a slow start today, nevertheless serious. As we speak, Charles, at the moment, the first plenary session for the day is underway. President Biden, reiterating his commitment, opened that session. Just to run through some of the commitments and investments that has been announced again today, President Biden, as you mentioned, has declared his support, we've always known this, for the African Union to join the G20 as a permanent member of the body. He described Africa as the indispensable partners in delivering the progress that benefits everyone. He also announced he will be visiting the continent, however, not mentioning when exactly. He made mention of the Russia invasion of Ukraine, how that has roiled the global economy and erased gains made in the recent times. He also announced that for the next 3 years, the United States is committing $55 billion to advance shared priorities and to support the Agenda 2063, which you also mentioned, the blueprint for Africa to become the powerhouse in the next 50 years. In addition, he talked about financial aid to low and middle income countries and helping them, ease those financial burdens, especially when it comes to debt relief. President Biden has also announced that in countering democratic backsliding on the continent, the Biden administration, working in close collaboration with African leaders and political civil society groups, he has also announced the the U.S. Is investing $75 million to strengthen transparent, accountable governance, and there will be a facility. Now, what the facility is supposed to do, Charles, is to help facilitate voter registration. We know that all too well in Nigeria, how it's difficult to get those voter registration perfect or almost perfect. And of course, this facility will also help support constitutional reforms. On the security front, President Biden mentioned that $100 million program would be set in motion, of course, by the U.S. Department of Defense, working with their African counterparts. And the president of Senegal, who doubles as the chair of the African Union, in his response at that plenary session, which is still underway, as I said, reeled out 6 priority areas that Africa would like the United States to use its influence as a powerhouse to help the continent address. And if I can just quickly reel out those 6 priority areas, he mentioned fight against terrorism, debt relief, a more sustained development of infrastructure, climate adaptation funding, fight against hunger, inclusive and a just world governance, that is having a seat at the global table. That, he said, the Biden administration has already given them response to by declaring the support for the G20 permanent membership. And finally, they talked about lifting the sanctions on Zimbabwe. Charles.
Adesuwa, thank you very much indeed for that comprehensive roundup. You mentioned that Mr. Biden was talking about visiting Africa, looking at some of the partners on the continents that the U.S. values the most on an individual rather than a regional level. I mean, we know that at one stage Nigeria and South Africa were up there prominently, as were Kenya and Ethiopia, although Ethiopia has got a bit messy now. Who today are the partners that the US would want to lobby the most?
And that's the thing, Charles. You're very right. For long, Africa has spoken individually as individual countries. And some would say that's where the problem has been, Charles. Africa has to be an equal. Africa as a continent should be seen as equal countries, equal 55 countries, although the US doesn't recognize Somaliland as a sovereign nation. So 55, 54 countries should be equal. And so when the US should be dealing with Africa, it should be dealing with Africa as a bloc and not individuality. And that's why it says, you know, it's important that the AFCFTA, the Agenda 2063, has come on board, and the administration of the Biden administration, the administration is fully supporting such initiatives on the African continent. The Pan-African spirit, I mean, that was the agenda by the founding fathers, Charles, for Africa to have, single markets, free movement of goods and people on the continent, see themselves as equal. And that is when Africa can come to the table having a strong voice for negotiations. And so at this summit, there are no really powerhouses from Africa, even though Nigeria and South Africa, as you said, have the largest economies, Nigeria being the largest country in terms of number and geographic size, Ethiopia coming second there as the second most populous nation on the continent. At the summit, they are seen as equal. It is one Africa, Charles.
Adesuwa, thank you very much indeed, and we really appreciate your coverage and your analysis there. Now you can get out of the cold for a few a few minutes. Adesuwa Omoruan is Arise anchor and correspondent, and she was talking to me there from Washington.